You know what I miss? I miss Totalbiscuit's Arbitrary Video Game Awards. I wonder whatever happened to them, and... oh, wait, right. The thing is though, the reason why I tried to start making video reviews in the first place was because I wanted to try to do something to make up for the absence that he created. And you can kind of see how well that went if you look at my YouTube channel. This time around though, with the Game Awards being what they are, and me trying to figure out what to make, why don't I try to create my own set of arbitrary game awards, using my own set of arbitrary rules. For this, I went through Steam and sorted everything by recently played, and sorted most of the games into about 7 different arbitrary categories. I've tried to limit things so a game is only nominated once, and after doing this, I realized that not only are these categories quite arbitrary, but with the one game limitation, it also kind of reflects the way that I decide upon and choose my games. By the way, you're not going to see this model show up throughout the video. It's only just for the intro and ending. I just needed something to fill the space. Now I hope the conditions for these categories and nominations are quite simple, because I went for games that I actually played this year, rather than ones that came out this year. And I think that's more of a realistic kind of listing, because there are going to be cases where I put a game off until it goes on sale, or just stays on my backlog until I get around to it. I also found it interesting that in the Steam Year in Review, which came out as I was trying to develop the script for this, was that only around 9% of games that people played this year on PC were actually new, and maybe this listing is a reflection of that. Now I will say up front that this video isn't perfect, and there is a lot of footage that's missing, but I do hope that it kind of makes up for the lack of streaming and gaming content that I've made over the past year or two. First category, Best Restoration. Whether it's a remake, a remaster, a retro game, or some kind of franchise reboot, there's something that's in common with all of these, and it's that for some reason they all start with the letter R. I've also lumped in retro games and reboots into this category because, well, the thing is, the one thing that is in common with all of these is that they all rely on nostalgia or reviving an old concept. Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection is another one of those game collections where they tried really hard to not only preserve the games, but also all of the supplementary things. In this case, they brought back all of the e-cards, and even brought back some of the cut content from the Boktai 3 collab, which was cut in the final game, because, well, the Boktai series kind of flopped, and they didn't put out the third game outside of Japan. One thing I really appreciated in the end though is that because of the way they made it, all of the files were kind of easy to get into and mod, particularly for the localization files, so as a little bit of a side thing for fun, I spent a few days changing all instances of land's name into net, which probably isn't something I would nominate this for, but I thought it was kind of fun. Star Ocean: The Second Story R. So this has a bit of a special place in my heart because this is really one of the definitive JRPGs, at least I consider it to be one. It's more than just having a good story and a good combat system, but it's also about being really well designed for console, like having a really complicated system and set of systems, and yet still making it easy to use. And that's really what I consider to be one of the defining aspects of a JRPG. There are quality of life elements here everywhere. Like there's wizards, there's like shortcuts and hotkeys and auto sorts, and all of those things were actually in the original game, but replicated and even improved on in some cases in the remake, where they add even more shortcuts. That said, one of the downsides is that they didn't really seem to work very hard on the English version. They just brought over the PSP translation, and they were kind of... I don't think they really tried to find new voice acting for it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Shredder's Revenge. Now this is where the line gets a little blurry here, because there's a certain point where this really does feel like the old games, but upgraded into widescreen with more players and some smoother controls, because controllers have more buttons now. But how much of it is really like a new game and just a recreation of the original? And, well, I don't know really how much there is for debate there, or whether it really is something to argue about, but that's kind of why I lumped it into this more general category of restoration. Either way, when I played this, it really did feel like I was playing something from my childhood, and I really appreciated it. And the winner for Best Restoration is Star Ocean. So I actually still need to finish this game, but I think the reason why I want to say this is the best game this year for restoration is that not only did they bring a lot of features from the original game back, but they also added a good number of new ones where I actually had to check if it was actually new, because the original game had so many, and these new things just felt so seamless. Even as something as simple as checking if you could say yes or no to the equipment wizard was something that I was not totally sure about, but it was a nice addition. Another one was that there's a completely new field ability from Whole Cloth called Bodyguard, which is completely related to the way that encounters have changed, because monsters appear on the world map now instead of just being random encounters, and it's like, oh wow, this is it's a completely new and yet it's a seamless addition to having more participation from the party members and more activity on the screen instead of just reducing encounters and stuff. Best game I forgot to play. Sometimes I install a game and I just forget to play it. That's kind of it. There are a lot of games out there, and I sometimes just install it and I put it to the side, and I eventually just keep putting it to the side while other stuff comes out. And even though I'm aware of what the game is and I'm interested, it's just not high enough for me to play it straight away. Vampire Survivors is, to be honest, actually not something I'm interested in, at all. I took one look at it, saw some brief footage, and I was like, oh, this is like Geometry Wars, except instead of vector art, they're kind of bringing it back with pixel art. And it's been nearly 20 years of Geometry Wars, and I played plenty of clones back then as well. And I just don't really have a desire to play that kind of arena-style survival. And yeah, there is a bit of appeal in the art here, but it just didn't appeal to me. For the most part, I put it on my list just to see if it was something child-friendly, but I never got around to it. Hi-Fi Rush. Every time I look at this, even with small snippets of footage, I think it's just a visual feast. More so than just the audio, which I keep hearing about, but you need to play it to hear it. Cell shading is one of those things that I think is really easy to start with and do, but also very difficult to master, and well, since it's kind of a minority art style, it's also something that's kind of underappreciated. And even with the small amount that I saw, I got the impression that they managed to nail the cel-shaded style and the American cartoon style very well. Wo Long. I think I put this on my list because it's about the Three Kingdoms. That's kind of it. I don't know what else to say about it, because it's another one of those games that's kind of everyone calls it a Souls-like and kind of thing, but I'm kind of slowly losing my interest in that kind of genre. And the best game I forgot to play is Hi-Fi Rush. Now, I think this category in general may or may not be a bad idea, but Hi-Fi Rush is the winner in this category mainly because it's the one game that I am still at least a tiny bit interested in. Everything else just had things that didn't really push me over the edge into playing it. Vampire Survivors, it's just an old genre that with a new coat of paint, and for Wo Long, I might be burned out on the Souls-like genre and its proliferation. Hi-Fi Rush is a mystery to me, and it's also a very unique art style that they decided to try, which is really something you really don't see, and it's quite rare. Best Girl Game. So, for these games, it's not really because they have a female protagonist or that I can create a female character or anything like that. It's more that in this game, I can be a girl and I can just enjoy that. There's nothing else more to it. I can be a female character and There's no glamour, there's nothing special. It's just a game that I can enjoy and sit down and kind of quietly appreciate the fact that I'm also a girl at the same time. And, well, it's an emotion that I don't think a lot of people can get. But maybe you do. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Now, this is the only game that actually has 2 entries in this entire video that I'm making, and I guess part of it is because I didn't really know where to put it between Restoration and Best Girl Game, because otherwise there wouldn't be a lot of entries. The thing is though, is that I wasn't really pushed into playing this game until I saw the character lineup and saw that April was a character. And there were already a lot of things that made this game appealing to me, but it just still wasn't enough to push me over the edge. And then when I saw the character lineup, I saw that it was more than the Turtles. They had Splinter and April as well. And when I saw April, I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go, I'll try it out. Of course, afterwards, when I jumped into the game, I also liked the fact that her stats and her archetype was kind of a weak but fast kind of thing, which is really my style. River City Girls. So this has been on my list for so long that River City Girls 2 came out this year, and I still haven't played the first one. So I'm not entirely sure of all of the reasons, but I did finally hop into this, and it was nice to just play as a bunch of different characters from the Kunio-kun series. But to be honest, I think I only really played like River City Ransom for a little while, all the way back when, and there was just something about this, like there was something that I just had trouble wrapping my head around, because this is an open world beat 'em up rather than a linear one, because I'm much more familiar with linear level based ones. Either way, I did end up playing this for a little while, but I did have trouble with navigating the world and stuff like that. Maybe if I gave it another go later on I'd like it more, but that's the way it is at the moment. Star Ocean Divine Force. So this actually came out last year, but I only got around to playing it sometime this year, I think. And, well, I do have to admit that one of the things that pushed me over the edge was probably the fact that you could play as Letitia. They tried to go for that kind of dual character story dynamic of having 2 separate stories, so you can play through the game twice. That said, the game did end up being a bit of a drag towards the end, and I wasn't really motivated to play as Raymond, and I kind of wonder if I even had an intention to be honest. I think the main reason it became a drag though was because the leveling system kind of flattened out at a certain point, and I realized that I wasn't really adding any kind of improvements or changes to my combat setup at a certain point, and I was just using the same attacks over and over. And even though it was kind of fun and exciting to see the combat, it did end up getting a little bit repetitive and not particularly difficult. Medieval Dynasty. Now this actually wasn't in my original list when I started making it last week, and the reason why is because I actually missed the sale for it like a couple weeks ago, but then with this being the last week of the year, Steam had another sale and I ended up getting it. And the reason why I got this was really because a friend of mine kept sharing these beautiful pictures of her settlement, and I just kept wondering what it was. And then when I looked it up, I realized that there was a co-op update that they did recently where they added a brand new map as well as character creation with a female character. And I thought, you know, if I'm gonna do an impulse purchase, I might as well do one where I can play as a female character. And, well, again, this is one of the things that just pushed me over the edge. When I did end up playing it though, I realized that it had a lot of things that were a little bit better over the other kind of open world survival games that I've tried. There's not much else I can say about it because it is something I just got a few days ago. And the winner for Best Girl Game is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I'm not really sure if it should be this game or Medieval Dynasty, but to be honest, Medieval Dynasty, it was a very last minute thing, and I started writing it before I added this to the list and before I got the game, and I already had Shredder's Revenge tagged. Even though that sounds a little unfair, being able to play as April and just really appreciating her animations and her look in the game is just something I find quite memorable. she's really exposed to all of the same kind of slapstick, cartoony physics animations as all of the other characters. And, well, yeah, like I ended up finishing the game at some point, so that's another point for it. Best update. Sometimes it's a patch, sometimes it's a DLC, sometimes it's an expansion pack, but in any case, all of these are games that came out some time back, and they've decided to refresh and update the game in some way to make you play the game again. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Pass. Now that's a bit of a mouthful, but the thing is, this game is 10 years old at this point. The original Mario Kart 8 had 32 courses, and then all of the DLC increased it to 48. But the thing about the Booster Pass is that even though it doesn't really change the racing mechanics, it added another 48 courses. It added so many, not so much to match the original game, but to match the updated version. So this Booster Pass, not only is it cheaper than a full game, but it contains more content than a full game. It contains the equivalent of a full game with its own expansion pass. And that's an incredible amount of value for money, I think. Also, they added a few new characters, and I think I just fell in love with Peach. For some reason, I think she beats Rosalina, because Rosalina was my main when playing Mario Kart 8 before, and yet Peach just seems to have this personality which I found really nice when doing all the jumps and tricks and stuff. So. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. Now, I originally actually had this game as the best game for best update, but, well, that might be spoiling things a little. But the thing is, this isn't just Phantom Liberty, but also a 2.0 patch that came along with it, and you don't need the expansion pack along with that. Now, on the one hand, Phantom Liberty is great, and the story here is fantastic, but there are some points where it felt like I wasn't really sure where it can fit seamlessly into the main story quest. Like, sometimes it just feels like too much of a tangent, and it does leave me wondering sometimes if this is something that's better as a separate game. But they ended up doing it this way, and it is what it is. As for the 2.0 update itself, from what I've heard, they essentially had to cannibalize and use the resources they allocated to the second expansion, where they expanded the open wilderness and the Badlands. So that means we're not actually going to get a second expansion pass. Now for me, well, even though I enjoyed it when it came out, a lot of people did not, and this patch essentially tries to fix that. For me, even though it felt like a fantastic patch and a fantastic set of features, it also felt like it changed the game too much, to the point where it just felt like an entirely different game. Because instead of trying to improve the core systems and all that, they essentially just ripped them out and replaced them wholesale into a completely different set of RPG systems, which I think is an extremely extreme change. And it's so extreme that you can actually just roll back if you go into the Steam beta, if you so desire to go back to 1.6, because the thing is, they already tried to fix the original system in patch 1.6. And sometimes, with the game as it is now, I kind of wonder if people are going to remember or will actually try to look back at what the original RPG system was. And I just find it a little bit of a shame that this kind of situation had to fall on CD Projekt Red. Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. Now for some reason I've been playing this daily for like 6 months, and which is kind of incredible. I don't really know why I keep coming back to it, but I just keep coming back to it. Like, it's just a fun game, even if I'm just hopping in for like 5 minutes at a time, and the combat system is just great. It's kind of a reboot of the original PSO2, which unfortunately I never really played a lot of, even though I pined after it for a very long time. And this reboot, and it is essentially a reboot, kind of brings new life into it and kind of makes it feel a lot more modern and less janky, which I do kind of appreciate. So it's kind of a tough decision, but I think the best update this year really has to be the Booster Pass. I originally actually wrote down Phantom Liberty, as I mentioned before, but the thing is, once I'm kind of finished with it, that's kind of it. Like, yeah, there is the potential for replayability and trying different builds, but it's such a big game
that I really have to wait like a year or something before I can consider replaying it. The end result of that is that throughout this year, I only really played it once. And when I tried it the second time, I did kind of feel burnout, even when I waited for like a month or something. These kinds of RPGs are just humongous. And there is still that issue of my feelings towards Update 2.0 and the original game systems. The booster pass, however, well, it's just one of those things where I can just hop into shortly for a quick race, and I feel like it's just an incredible amount of content. 48 new courses, that's so many. This is essentially one of their areas of playing with a different kind of game development model, I think, and I think it's working out quite well for them. Like, updating a game for 10 years? That's kind of unprecedented. Best revisit. Sometimes there isn't anything new about the game at all. It's just, I felt like playing it again. And I felt like this was something that's still worth noting. Surviving Mars. I honestly don't even know when I played this, or how much I played it, but it's one of those games that ever since I got it, I kind of come back to it like once a year or something. And yeah, I don't really get far, or I don't stay long for it, but there's just something comfortable about playing this game. Like, there's just something comfy about it. I'm not really sure on a kind of vibe level, but there's something intellectually comforting. Like, every time I play this and the story snippets come up and all of these vignettes appear, it's always framed as something that's a bit more hopeful and looking toward the future, and there's just something I appreciate about that. Even if I don't play it that much, it's just nice to go in and think, yeah, this is a hopeful future. You know, it's not a bad future, it's not a utopian future, but it's a future that's about looking forward and working with the troubles that we come across, but never being disheartened about it. And I wish there was more of that in the world, I suppose. Elden Ring. Now, to be honest, for Elden Ring, I actually didn't even remember I played it. I had to check through my screenshots to see what I actually did, and I'm pretty sure I replayed it just so I could mess around with metagaming and farming like more aggressively rather than trying to play by the intended rules of the game. But I don't think I got very far. During my first playthrough, it took a while for me to actually reach the end as well, and by the end of it I think I was kind of burned out on Souls-likes, so, well, yeah, it is what it is, and it seems to be a significant game for me this year, according to the stats anyway, so it's here as a listing. Death Stranding Director's Cut. Now, when I played this originally, I actually played this on stream. It was not the Director's Cut version, but I don't think that really matters that much. And the thing is, I was kind of stressed while playing it. I kind of rushed through the whole thing, and I sat down and binged it for like 3 days straight, because I just didn't know when I would be unable to play it. And I'm not really sure if I enjoyed it. So when I played this again, I wasn't streaming this year, but I did do it anyway. I kind of felt more free to do what I felt like, and part of it was because of the story. Like, I already knew the story, so I could skip all the scenes, but another one was because, well, I just didn't feel constrained by time, so I was able to use as much or as little as I liked. Overall, I just felt like there was less pressure on me, even though I did try to stream on a whim for a number of sessions. Like, I was just enjoying the game as it was, and I think I was just in a better state. Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. Now, to be honest, I actually only started playing this last week, and the reason why was because I missed the sale for Medieval Dynasty, and I wanted to play something a bit medieval because of that. So I played this for like a week, like a week before I wrote the script for this, and yeah, I think it was just nice. Like, it was a nice set of updates. It was still mostly the same game as when I originally got it, and I ended up just applying a bunch of different mods to it to streamline stuff like trading, and yeah, it's just a nice thing to play for a little while and try to see how far you can progress. It's really one of those games where you have to kind of make your own story though, so it's not for everyone, and when Medieval Dynasty did go on sale again, I did just hop onto that. So, yeah. I think the winner for Best Revisit, though, really has to be Death Stranding Director's Cut. Now, the reason why it's here instead of Best Update is because I didn't really get into the Director's Cut content. I actually had to look up what the content actually was, and it turns out I only got like one item from it that I paid attention to. For the most part, though, I think even though I streamed it, and streaming was a result of part of my stress when I played it for the first time, it really just did feel less stressful for me to play. Like, I was able to just spend as much time as I wanted, and I had the decision to spend that time, even though I don't think it turned out the way that I thought. But after that, like after the failed speedrun, I kind of just relaxed and didn't really think about like going through intended routes and stuff like that. I just went through the game and kind of just appreciated that I was able to play it. And sometimes that's enough.
Best Whimsy. So when I saw this game, either in my library or on the store page, I essentially just went, you know what, screw it, I'll try it out. Like, maybe I'll just stream it, I'll try it out, I'll play it. It's not my thing, but it looks interesting enough that I'll give it a go.
Mega Serval. So when I downloaded this, I had no idea really that it was associated with Kimono Friends and that it was a fan game. I really did not look at it from that angle. The reason I got it was actually because of me developing the Compose Man game and wanting to look at examples of Mega Man inspired games that were not explicitly Mega Man fan games. Like they don't have any Mega Man branding, and they just have a completely original concept. And Mega Serval just happened to come out around that time where I was kind of trying to determine what my second major update to the game would be. And I really did look at things from that perspective. Like, the game was not overly hard, and it is free because it's a fan game and they can't, you know, sell it for money or anything like that. And I just ended up learning a few different things from it. Eliza. This game came out several years ago, and I don't know what motivated me to try it out, but it felt very relevant when I eventually realized that it was about AI and chat AI. And essentially, the plot is about how, in order to create the illusion of a real person speaking to you, you're hired as a person who reads out AI text. And there's just something thought-provoking about it. Like, I didn't actually get that far in the game, and I think I just put it down, but of the amount that I did play, it was still quite thought-provoking, and I think it was just a bit of a coincidence, maybe, that I decided to just try it on a whim, but I think it ended up just being a thought-provoking experience, although I'm not really sure what I took away from it. The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. So this is really the game that made me think of this category in the first place, because sometimes I see a game and I think, you know, like, screw it, we'll do it live. Like, I really did think of that. Like, I saw it, I saw it was trending, and I thought, you know, I have all this streaming stuff set up. Even though I'm not streaming this year a lot, I still have this stuff set up, and I still have improvements, and I'm still iterating. I might as well just use this game to run all of that and see if, like, I'm okay with doing it. And it really did feel like a game that, if it didn't work out, it was no loss to me, you know, because it was an interesting visual novel, and that's kind of it. Like, I really appreciated the kind of throwback nostalgia references. It kind of skipped over and passed over all of the really recent Sonic games and really relied on the stuff that I played in childhood and what the developers really made in their childhood as well, which is all the Sonic Adventure era stuff. And I think it was just a nice couple of hours. Steam Engine Simulator. Choo choo, choo choo, or something like that. I have no idea how this came up. Like, maybe it showed up on my front page, maybe the discovery queue, I have no idea, but it really piqued my curiosity because it's just a plain name, like Steam Engine Simulator. Okay, it's free, and it looks like a schematic blueprint. And it turns out that it's really just someone's programming hobby project that they decided to clean up and put on Steam. And it's a full-on physics simulation. Like, all of the sound here is procedurally generated. There is no sample of a steam engine sound. It's all done through physics simulation and then outputting that physics simulation through the speakers. And it is amazing. Like, it really is amazing. There's also another one, which isn't a game, but on their channel they ended up making like a 4-stroke or a 6-stroke engine. And it's like, oh wow, like this sounds legitimate as well. Like, this sounds straight up just sounds like a V6 engine. Which I thought was just fascinating. And they did end up adding like a few basic achievements, like, you know, get this much of an RPM and use up this much water. And I had fun just playing with the variables and water levels and seeing how fast and like what variables affected the actual speed of the engine. And the winner for Best Whimsy is... It is hard to say, but I have to pick something, and I'm going to say Steam Engine Simulator. I think the reason why is because it just sticks in my memory the strongest. Like, it really is the most offbeat thing that I've played. Everything here in this category are offbeat things, but this was the most offbeat, and it sticks in my memory as a result. Like, for Mega Serval, I did it mainly for research. Like, I intended on doing more deeper research, but then I just saw this on the front page, and it's like, oh, that's a bit of a coincidental thing. But the thing is, Kemono Friends is not an anime that I'm really knowledgeable about, so I didn't really get any of the references. I mainly looked at it as like a Mega Man inspired game. And the same thing I could probably say for Eliza and the Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, because all of those things were really brief things. Well, everything here was brief, I would say, but it just didn't stick. Like, for Eliza, it was thought-provoking, but it was fictional, and I had all of these live things to experiment on, and I was already experimenting with these live things. So even though it's relevant, it's also one of those things where it's like, I don't need to think hypothetically anymore. Like, I can jump in and actually see these reactions take place. And for the Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, it's not really a big series for me anymore. I should probably try out some more Sonic games, but even though it's something I played in my childhood, it's just not a big thing for me. So even though it was a nice throwback, it's not a good thing to linger on that for too long, I think. I think everyone kind of moved on from it quickly. Best New Game. So looking at the Steam year-end review, there was an interesting statistic that stood out to me, and it's that only about 9% of games that people play during a year were actually new. For me, it's a little bit higher, about 20%, but even then, that's actually surprisingly low. So instead of something like Game of the Year or like something like that, I thought it sounded more appropriate to have a category that was just about a new game. There are, of course, games in the other categories that were also new as well, but for these games are the ones that I played specifically because it was new. Armored Core 6. I think the main thing I appreciate here is actually the controls and how they managed to get the controller controls really well. So well, in fact, that I actually prefer it over keyboard and mouse. Now, this is a complicated game series, and as a mech game, you have lots and lots of little independent controls. I mean, like, I've played Steel Battalion, you know, like that giant controller, and there are just lots of little buttons and things you can control, like all of the weapon systems and energy systems, and they just somehow managed to improve that control layout and have all of these different functions so that you really have to use the whole controller and you really have to be aware of all of the buttons. And while it's not something I can say for sure, I really think that this is the part, like this is the one part where Demon's Souls and Dark Souls really contributed to the control system of Armored Core 6. Not so much the level design or the game loop or anything like that, but I think something that people aren't aware of now, because it's so common now, is that what Demon's Souls did was create a game that emphasized extremely heavy use of the right analog stick, to the point where they moved the attack buttons to the shoulders and, you know, all of the auxiliary commands to the face buttons instead of what is typically the other way around. And after doing that for so many years, carrying that concept over to the complicated robotic control system of Armored Core 6, it just felt so natural, and I could really see the relation to it quite quickly. And I really wonder if this is something that anyone really thinks about, but that's the link that I see, more so than any other aspect of the game loops of the Souls-like genre. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, to be honest, I'm not really sure what to say about this, because I did do like a massive 20-minute review video like shortly after the game came out. And yeah, it's a big game that's also a continuation and kind of a rehash of Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is old enough where revisiting the same game geometry and world map geometry isn't really that much of a big deal. Like, it's familiar enough that you know where some major landmarks are, but it's also like designed so well that you can keep playing Breath of the Wild over and over and over, and the world still feels new. And I think they took advantage of that, because it did still feel new to me. But even then, I actually ended up putting down the game after clearing it with only about 50% completion. And I'm not really sure why. I know part of it was because I didn't want to burn out on the game, but I guess I just didn't feel the need to replay it after seeing the ending once. And it might be quite similar to Cyberpunk and Phantom Liberty and how I only played that game once, and it might be because it's being so huge that I need to kind of wait a while before I can replay it. And so, for me, the best new game of this year is actually Armored Core 6. Now, this category is the only one with only 2 entries, and I actually did consider adding Bravely Default 2, but that came out several years ago, even though I played it this year, and I'm just putting that there as an honorary mention instead. But with Armored Core 6, I think I tried looking at the controls for previous games as well, and it's like, it is radically different. It's a very specific area, but it's also one of the most significant, where just having well thought out controls and streamlining what you can streamline without affecting the game loop, that's where good control design comes in. And I can see the resemblance. I can, like, even though it's a radically different game, I can see the resemblance to the same way that the controls in Demon's Souls and Dark Souls were, like how it's all connected. It doesn't rely on conventions. Like, yes, there is still that convention of using the left analog stick to move, but just the simple matter of moving the attack button to a shoulder, even though it's usually on one of the face buttons, that changed the dynamics so much, because you have to use the right analog stick to look around significantly more in this type of game compared to others. And it just fits, like, it just somehow fits. It's one of those things that you don't think about. So since I did mention honorary mentions, I did actually have some for others. For Best Revisit, I also had an honorary mention for Tetris Effect Connected, and the reason I left that out was mainly because it's Tetris. Like, it's a 30-year-old game, nearly 40 years old now, and yeah. Same thing for Best Game I Forgot to Play. There are also several other games that I just kind of got from like Humble Bundle keys, and it's like I installed it, but it's so low on my priority list. Stuff like Pathfinder, Temtem, and really just a bunch of others. Either way, I think I've been talking to the microphone. I think I've been speaking into my microphone for like 50 minutes now, and I need to cut this down into hopefully 20 minutes, and I don't think that's gonna work. Hopefully, 24 micro reviews will be something that satisfies you, and maybe you can grab something on the Steam sale if you're seeing this recently. If you made it to the end, I hope you have a good time, and I'll see you, not just next time, but next year. Bye bye.